Bum 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 bum. I don't have the button for us to play our intro music, but welcome everybody to Star Trek. I guess I should give the star date, right? And now we start.
Yes, start date.
Star date 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
11, 12.
There we go. I don't know what our actual star date is. Welcome to Whose Line Is It Anyway, where star dates don't matter. I am your reluctantly appointed temporary Captain Grant Davis, and with me on the view screen are
Mariah Gossett,
Clyde Haynes,
and Captain Mike is away on an away mission to the planet Naboo, where he is mud rustling a Ferengi. But we are your Star Trek Discovery Pod crew.
So many things wrong with that.
We're your Star Trek Discovery Pod crew, a kind of smart, kind of funny podcast about the new Star Trek and beyond. The movie,
beyond.
The
Kelvinverse
movie. We mainly just talk about that. This week we're live streaming the pod over on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. We're covering the third episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, Temporal Edict. And honestly, I missed last week's episode with you guys. I was on the away mission to Denver, and I assume that you guys just hated the episode and everything's awful and we're done with this whole podcast venture. Is that correct?
I'm gonna say that's a no.
Nope.
Yeah, was it fun? Did you guys like it?
I did like it. I liked that episode a lot. I'm sad you
great.
missed it. Did you watch it, or did you just watch this episode?
No, because I was afraid I was going to be confused if I just jumped in here. I was like, I definitely need to watch that one. And they're only 5 minutes, so it's easy to just binge through.
Yeah, exactly.
Last week was a pretty good episode, actually.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
So Mariah, could you remind the listeners where they can listen?
I am. I was correcting who directed and wrote this episode in the show notes for you, but. Just a reminder, you can listen to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, anywhere that you find all the podcasts that you know and love. You can also watch us on YouTube and see our beautiful faces. I put on makeup just for y'all, and I washed my hair. So double whammy today. But you can find all the links of where to listen and or see us at StarTrekPod.co.
I did not put on makeup, nor did I wash or cut my beard, but I love you guys all the same. And if you want more, if you want to know how to hang out with us between pods and you want to do some really cool stuff, you can check out our Patreon. So if you just give us, I don't know what, $2 $2 an episode. $2 an episode. $2. You can then be invited to our Slack channel where you get to interact with us and talk about all kind of things. There are watch pods. There are discussions on pretty much all of the Trek things, you name it. And you'll get access to some pretty cool stuff like the Badass Women of Trek pod. And our Kelvinverse pods and all of the extra Star Trek-esque pods that we do. And definitely shout out to Mike and Mariah who hold the Patreon pods down. But yeah, that's where we talk about old Trek like TNG and DS9 and Voyager. So yeah, check us out. Check out our Patreon. There's
ponderings of some Enterprise happening.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, is that true?
Don't talk about that show.
I'm scared to actually have to watch Enterprise.
I've watched some Enterprise, y'all. I understand the theme song thing, but it's not. I like the show. It's fine.
I've tried 3 times to get into it.
But that's okay, because we're not talking about Enterprise tonight at all.
No. We did just lose our one Enterprise fan who exists. They're gone. They're no longer a fan.
Come back.
No, they're gonna come back because they like to yell at me.
Yeah. Enterprise people want to abuse the rest of us. And just a reminder, everyone, listeners listening to the audio version of this podcast, you should make use of the fact that we do a live stream of this every Thursday at 9 p.m. Central. Just go to StarTrekPod.co and click on that YouTube link, or you can just subscribe to us over on our YouTube channel. You can watch us there. We're also over on Twitch. We're over on Facebook, I think, as well. So we're putting it out. We're putting ourselves out there. We do this whole thing live, and I don't know if we edit it too much after the fact, so we're pretty accountable for everything that we say. And we love you when you guys are able to join, because if you guys come join us, you can chat with us. Like the people that are watching tonight, please do participate in the live chat. If you have any comments or questions you want us to address later in the pod, just type the word POD in all caps right before your comment, and hopefully we'll be able to catch that and bring it up later in the episode. With all of that said, I think we're done with our intro portion. Let's go ahead and move on to talking about Lower Decks, everyone. This is episode 3, titled Temporal Edict. This is directed by Bob Suarez, and I think there was a little bit of a dispute here on who wrote this. Over on IMDb, it says Mike McMahon wrote it. Over on Wikipedia, however, it said this was written by Dave Ihlenfeld and David Wright, who seem to be like a writing combo who've worked on like Family Guy and some other stuff as well. So I don't know who wrote it.
The written by on the credits that went up said Mike McCann, but
well, maybe, I mean, sometimes
they're all in the room.
Yeah, sometimes in those writing things, it gives something over to other people. But if he ends up doing enough of a percentage of like rewrites at the end before it gets put out, he's the one who takes credit.
Ooh, contracts. Ooh.
Yeah. This was directed by Bob Suarez, who has come from doing a bunch of other animated direction, Big Mouth, Solar Opposites. It seems like he's worked on a lot of projects that Mike McMahon has also worked on. And our synopsis for this episode is: a new work protocol eliminating buffer time has the Lower Decks crew running ragged as they try to keep up with their tightened schedules. Ensign Mariner and Commander Ransom's mutual lack of respect comes to a head during an away mission when things get very
steamy,
very sexually tense. Yeah, and if you're new here, you're probably familiar with other podcasts giving their hot takes on things. But because this is Star Trek Discovery Pod, we don't give you guys any hot takes. We give you guys some
hot freaks.
Hot freaks time. Mariah, why don't you take it away and give us your hot freak on episode 3?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I like watching these animated episodes at least twice just because they are so fast and like joke dense. And so, my first watch this morning with my cup of coffee, it was like a nice way to start my day. I really enjoyed it. And then on second watch, I got to write all my little nerd notes about what aliens they were interacting with and all that kind of fun stuff. And, I am loving this show because we are getting to see and I'm going to probably say this every episode because we get it every episode. We get to see a different planet. We get to see different cultures. We're getting to see the Federation as it continues to expand because this is a second contact ship. So I'm really enjoying getting to kind of see those interactions and how the universe continues to sort of build itself through this show. I really liked Boimler's worst fears coming to life at the end of this, in that he was like living his best life as an overworked millennial kind of character who has now figured out a way to be the most efficient, which I highly relate to as someone who sometimes fears the downtime for too much thought that can happen. And then, you kind of see the effects of what happens when you're overly efficient. So I thought it was a very smart episode in the way that it was written so much like a workplace comedy, especially this episode. We're getting to see the effects across the entire ship. It feels very much like something that you could see a plot line happening in like a Leslie Knope type of world. Like she would come up with this plan. So I enjoyed how that played out. And I thought everything going on the planet was so reminiscent to the original series. There's lots of fun little Kirkisms that happen in the battle. So I'm really enjoying all of these episodes and how they're balancing bringing us new stuff and then paying homage and leaving us lots of fun Easter eggs along the way.
Clyde, what is your hot freak?
My hot freak is I thought this episode was okay. I think coming off last episode where I was really into it, this one was like, it was okay. I'm not gonna go back and say, yo, that episode 3, that was a gem. That's the one. I think this one was just kind of interesting. There were a couple moments, I was thinking as I get into this hot freak, let me roll down my sleeves because this is in a barn. There were some great lines in it. I loved the fact that I got to see Ransom in a different light. Because at this point, up until this point, I just kind of looked at him and been like, right? Like I don't know what he's bringing to the table. But this is like, wow, the guy can fight. He's making some smart moves. It was I was enjoying it.
Sorry, I put up an image on the screen, probably a little bit preemptively, but I saw a question from Choopy who said, does anyone know who voiced the little alien leader guy? His voice was so familiar. And I'm not actually sure it's Neil Casey, but I kind of thought it was Neil Casey, who is this actor right here.
Mm-hmm.
He actually worked alongside our own Rutherford, Eugene Cordero, on the show Other Space.
It is Neil Casey. And
I was thinking it was him. It reminds me of him. And he's a great voice actor and actor. He's really funny. If anyone hasn't seen Other Space, I highly recommend it.
I will say this one other thing. And Mariah, I agree with you completely in the fact that the one thing I think it does really well is to present itself as an office comedy, right? A workplace comedy. As in, what happens if you make a decision that is normally made in the office all the time, and you take it to its extreme, right? And then you just stay there for a little bit. And so I thought that the premise was really smart. I just don't know that I thought it was that funny.
Okay, so for my hot freak, jumping in here, I really enjoyed this episode as well. I think I'm getting so much more a sense of the work dynamic of this crew as they continue to kind of flesh everything out here. I love getting this other side of Mariner and her relationship with Ransom, and the tension between her and the upper deck crew, not just her mother. And Boimler proving that he's actually extremely adept, both in last episode, when he needed to be in the last episode, and in this episode, where he has to, he shows that he is extremely efficient, and he's a person who needs that kind of structure and excels in it, which makes it all the more sweet. The Boimler, what was it called at the end? The Boimler
protocol or something.
Boimler protocol, and how that kind of the Boimler effect, how that goes against his entire ethos. I think that, Mariah, you talking about this being an office comedy is perfect. I think that's where I want this show to be. I like how it's addressing the caste system, the social structure and hierarchy of this ship, of the people who are treated as office drones and made to just fill out task after task, while the people up top get to just have fun adventures, and then when things are micromanaged, it just goes sideways. I thought this was a really fun episode that kind of continued this tradition, and at this point I have a really good sense of their approach to comedy, the beats that they take, and the pacing of everything, and it's feeling very comfortable to me. It is the type of comedy I enjoy, and I'm wanting to watch week after week. So right now I'm sold.
Yeah, I just saw Nathan Bliss commented, the biggest threat to the ship was micromanagement and flawed. And then underneath it just says very relatable. And I think anyone who has ever worked in a job and like as someone who has had to manage people before, like I know when you try to get down too granular, it just is going to come back and kick you right back in the butt. And so I felt for Captain Freeman in this episode, you know, when she thinks she's doing the right thing because she wants her ship to excel. And there is this like constant comparison to the crew of the Enterprise, right? Is like the Enterprise is the ultimate ship and everyone wants to be the captain of the Enterprise, but everyone can't be the captain of the Enterprise. So you have to prove yourself in other ways to prove that like what you're doing is also of substance. And so I could really feel like for that character in this moment.
Right. Well, let's take a look at that. Going around, who do you guys relate to more, I guess? Do you need that kind of structure and timekeeping in order to execute projects, or are you one of those, let's pad everything out, I'll take care of this in my own time?
I'll jump in and say the best way to get me to be the least productive possible is to schedule my time for me, right? I think giving me broad kind of guidelines and say, hey, this is what we need to get done. How long how long is it going to take for you to get it done is the best way to get the most kind of efficiency out of me. So yeah, I'm much more like Tendi than Boimler.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm a to-do list person, but I don't put like time codes next to the to-do list, right? Like I do love my calendar, but in that way that it's only for things that are like at hard set times rather than like this is when I'm going to get this thing done. So I think as far as like what character, it's like, you know, I think I would want to be Mariner, but I know I'm not that cool. So I'm going to probably be closer to, you know, Tendi or to Rutherford. You know, I think Rutherford as well, because I can definitely see myself like when I'm really into a project, I get so focused, you know, like the rest of the world can sort of disappear for a while. And I think he's kind of that sort of worker. What about you, Grant?
I'm kind of mixed because I'm not efficient and effective like Boimler, but I find that if someone else will just put particular parameters that they want something achieved by, I can get it done. Like, go ahead and say you want this tight deadline. I will figure out a way and I will execute it. But if there's no kind of restraints on me, I will procrastinate until the day after. It's what I do. It like so. I in part, I was like, yeah, okay, that kind of makes sense to me. Like, people are just like wasting time. But it didn't seem to me on this ship that people suddenly being so much more busy and executing all these tasks made the ship more efficient. In fact, it seemed like there was a never-ending list of things for them to do, which, in my experience, is never the case on in any place I've worked. You will run out of stuff to do if you do your stuff too quickly, and then you just sit there and you're kind of bored. So it is absolutely the best way. It is just to pad it all out.
Yeah.
How many times they gotta like rechange those little like pod things everywhere?
I did have like slight flashbacks to like when I worked in service industry jobs, and there's always that manager who's like, if there's time for leaning, there's time for cleaning. And so you had to just like find the weird like small task to make it look like you were busy when it wasn't busy, but so that they would leave you alone. You're just like, I'm just folding napkins forever. Like
Chupi says she's a buffer worker. When upper management realized they gave me a very important job and left me alone, like literal alone, very pleased.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
So I loved in the kind of switching back into the episode and the cold open specifically. I loved that through these jokes, we found out that Boimler is a total like mama's boy, or there's something going on with him and his relationship with his mom. And I kind of enjoyed, like, I like how they're peppering out all of these details about a character, because I think with new shows, it can sometimes be really difficult to not want to like front load, like, here is all of the trauma about this character that's going to make you want to believe in them. And, you know, I think we've talked about how so far Boimler isn't as super likable and a little annoying, but it's like, I think as we've been going along so far, he's getting a little bit more likable, or at least a little bit more interesting to me. Cause now I'm like, what is this situation with him and his mom? Cause I think about like on Disco with Tilly and her mom and like this expectation setting. So I'm hoping they're setting this up so we get a little bit more information about his upbringing at some point, because we've gotten a little bit, I think, about Mariner at this point, knowing that both of her parents are, you know, higher echelons in Starfleet.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Requiem for a Hug, it was like
that once I heard that title, I was like, no. Now we need to unpack a lot more things about Boimler. But I agree. Although I guess I wasn't necessarily feeling as put off by him. I like the anxiety ridden straight man character that he's providing to everyone else's kind of off kilter characters. It's a pretty formulaic, I guess, in certain regards, but it makes a good balance for the dynamics of the characters when they're interacting. And so I was appreciating where he's kind of coming from, and that like he's very much a stick to the books and wanna climb the ranks, but he clearly has a lot he needs to learn if he wants to play the social game, I think.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I really do appreciate about this show is it does feel TNG ask in the fact that, Mariah, to your point, it's not like we get these character, you know, just packages where it's like, okay, here's everything you need to know about Boimler, right? There's not this big monologue that just unpacks everything. But in traditional TNG fashion, the episode is centered on the mission. And in the context of that mission, we're going to pull out these little pieces of the characters that are eventually will give you a complete understanding of kind of their background. And then I imagine that at some point we're going to get some, you know, a very character specific episode or something, you know, where, you know, Deanna Troy's parents are on the ship, stuff like that. But something else that was interesting to me is that and the entire time that I saw Mariner and Ransom interact, he didn't treat her as though he knew who her mother was.
Like he didn't have that deference.
Like either way, he didn't like. There wasn't any references to it. There wasn't like, you know, you're lucky that your mother's who she is. Otherwise, I'd be all over you. Or, you know, I've got to be extra hard on you. Like there was nothing. I mean, he stabbed her in the foot, like she was anybody else. So it makes me wonder: does anyone know who she is?
That's interesting. You know, I thought especially we saw this in last week's episode with Rutherford trying all the different jobs, but there's this real sense of respect for one's choices and one's individuality, and maybe that isn't such a factor for other people on this ship. Maybe there is an awareness by a lot of people. I don't get the sense that Boimler knows at all, but maybe Ransom does know and just doesn't care, just in the same way as like, oh, you want to transfer to a different job? We absolutely love you here and you're great, but we want whatever's best for you on the ship.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. I'm wondering if it's going to be revealed next episode, because we saw in the if folks watch the like coming soon little bit, she's walking out doing her sarcastic live long and prosper, and you know, Ransom is right outside the door, and so I bet he's going to walk in and be like, how are you letting, you know, her talk to you like that? And, you know, who knows, she might brush it off and be like, it's complicated, or she might reveal like, oh, because that's my kid, you know? So I do think I would agree with all our commenters here. I don't think people know quite yet.
Yeah, it seems that most people are kind of that opinion. Nate Blitz is saying he has a feeling Commander Ransom does know, but the first officer is supposed to oversee the crew, and so can just detach from that.
True.
It is interesting because I think we were presented in this episode, or at least in the beginning of this episode, with Commander Ransom just kind of being this insufferable mimbo, right? This kind of dude who wants to be another Kirk kind of hero character, but who knows if he actually has the chops to kind of back it up. And in his squabbling with Mariner, you see that he breaks rules, breaks protocol, and wins her heart in a way, but also totally like destroys that. I mean, that whole scene was definitely a Hulk versus Thor scene right out of Thor Ragnarok, right? But how he just whoops that dude's ass, it was like, oh, okay, this is a good scene.
Yeah, I think Ransom is very much the himbo of the show, a handsome bimbo.
Himbo, that's the term.
Yeah, himbo. And there's like that moment where he like walks back and he does the like arm snap thing. That's very that gif of Henry Cavill that's going around.
He cocks his arms.
He goes, poof, poof, and I'm just like, oh, okay, you're an animated thing, but I can tell they're trying to make me know that you're an attractive person in this universe.
Definitely. The reference both to Ghost Protocol, or which I don't even remember which Mission Impossible movie that was, but the Henry Cavill scene and the Thor Ragnarok stuff. I think it's interesting just kind of seeing these references they're making as well.
Yeah, there's some fun ones. And Clyde, I wanted to kind of come back to you talking about how a lot of the characters are being, set up more in the TNG sort of style of things. There's even that moment in the lift where Boimler is humming the theme song.
He is. Mm-hmm.
And I was reading this interesting article about how, the show is canon. And so it becomes the question of, are there like theme songs to ships? That would be cool. And then two, the concept, because obviously there is like music and culture that has translated and happens in scene. And I can't remember, there's like different terms in like film and television making of whether or not the sound that is happening is something that the characters can hear or something only the audience can hear, which is typically things like soundtrack and stuff like that. But then if you think about if characters are listening to a radio, then they are also hearing it. So it's interesting to think about the idea that maybe some of this music that is so iconic to us has also somehow infiltrated and is also in the universe itself.
Ooh, like it's some sort of like meta fourth wall breaking thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like is a Star Trek-esque show existing in the world of Star Trek? Do they watch the previous adventures of people on Kirk's ship, like as a televised kind of series on their ship? Like, you have plenty of years to like go by and watch media of the adventures of other people, and they're so revered. I wouldn't see why there wouldn't be a fictionalized depiction of them.
Right. Like it would be, we have war movies now. We have, shows about police, firefighters, like all these things that are these like iconic institutions of culture, and things that are based on a true story. So why wouldn't there be like shows about Starfleet?
I love that idea. I don't know why I hadn't thought of that before. You were talking a little bit about Ransom as well, and I was thinking of how in last week's episode and a bit more this week, they've fleshed out some of these background characters more and more, and we've seen such personality and quirks to each of them that in a way, isn't this sort of feeling a little bit more like The Simpsons or like Parks and Rec, in which they're building not just your core team, but they're building this kind of cast of characters that they can just bring in for their known traits and like a joke here or there?
I'm sorry. I read a comment and I zoned out on the last things you said.
It's fine.
I love that honesty.
I'm just like, I feel like I needed to say something, and I was like, "Oh, were you asking me a question?" And then I was like, I was reading something that I wanted to bring up later. I'm very sorry.
I'll jump in there for you, Grant. I think that's interesting. I'm not sure if I see it yet, but this idea that certain characters have it's almost like they're not full characters, right? But they have a kind of a go-to punchline, and they come in for that particular element of comedic relief. I do think we're seeing that with the upper decks, particularly I don't remember his name, but the
big
chief
security
of security
guard, right?
yeah. Like he
That's what
kind
I
of
was
comes
thinking.
in for the same note, right? And he also, the chief medical officer, kind of does the same thing. I think Ransom is the first time that we're seeing a more developed character, Ransom and Captain, or as Boimler would say, Captain. I think so. I'm trying to hold out to see if we're gonna get some more development from some of that other senior staff, so that they're not just this kind of like, to your point from The Simpsons, this Apu like character, or Chief Wiggum.
Right. Yeah. I'm wondering, especially as they are gonna continue to expand their Rolodex of voice actors that they can kind of bring in here or there to voice someone. And it's interesting that they have, such notable names like Jerry O'Connell doing Ransom, and like how many episodes will he even voice something on this? It's probably one day for an entire season. He just comes in and reads a bunch of lines and bounces out of there. They have that for everyone.
Yeah.
And so once they kind of build up this kind of quirky ensemble, I think it's just going to be more and more enriching as this show and its format continues.
Yeah, now that I have heard a recap of what you said, Grant, I think the show is going to be smart in how they use the upper deck characters to sort of pepper in larger storylines, because all of these lower deck characters are looking for some sort of mentor in a sense. And so I think we'll probably get a lot more of those like mentor mentee sort of moments, and hopefully that'll sort of garner some deeper character building for these quote unquote smaller characters on this particular show. But because, like you were saying, Clyde, like they have Jerry O'Connell, like they have a pretty deep Rolodex, Paul Scheer, like the voice actors that they've managed to bring in are very notable. But I also think it's going to be interesting, as it's just such an interesting time in general for how entertainment is going to move forward currently without the ability to do large scale productions. And so I'm thinking, because we've now launched an animated show, like we'll probably see a season 2 of Lower Decks, I think, a lot sooner than we would normally see something like that, just because they are able to do this kind of stuff from home.
Right.
So yeah, I think because of that and because of who they already have on deck, we're going to see that character building happening, but they're never going to be, I don't think they'll ever take the main stage of what's going on, just because that's not what this show is. But I am very interested in this sort of Mariner Ransom possible romantic relationship, but it could also just be Mariner wants to hook up with the hunky dude at the top of the totem pole,
Yeah, so that kind of dynamic, I think it's not unfamiliar. The hostile, combative, but obviously romantic interest kind of relationship that's going on between them. The extra layer of what's interesting is the obvious power differential between them, in that he's upper decks, she's lower decks, and his boss is her mom. I think all of that is why I definitely want to see more of that explored. And it seems like both of them were kind of caught surprised by this undeniable but secret attraction that they both kind of share for each other.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of like an early, just to reference, I think, back to another workplace comedy. It's like an early Parks and Rec episode where Ben Wyatt has to meet Leslie Knope's mom, who is this sort of like powerhouse of a woman who ends up hitting on Ben.
Right.
And like it becomes like a funny, awkward situation. I think that could also, if Ransom is someone who finds himself, like attracted to women who sort of break the rules and are capable of leadership as well. Anyway, I just think the possibilities are really endless of what could be fun.
Right. As Chris Rogers says, banging pots and pans together, enemies to lovers, Ransom and Mariner sitting in a tree.
I think one thing that's interesting is when you think about that and you talk about these upper decks and lower decks, I was kind of thinking about this earlier, that Star Trek has a bit of a naval history to it. So when you think about kind of their ranking and the way they're structured, it's very kind of U.S. Navy. And in the Navy, you've got these regulations about kind of fraternizing with kind of on the same, or particularly within rank. But that never seems to be quite the issue in Star Trek, does it? And so the question is, outside of the fact that he's like, that's kind of hot, and he's talking about the daughter of his captain, which he may not know.
May not.
He may not know. There may not be an issue there, which could be fascinating if they were to hook up and it all came out.
I know that the earlier shows of Star Trek were made in a different era, and probably people would not even think as much about the problems of dating subordinates. But was that addressed in other Trek episodes, like this kind of like, I'm your boss, but we're interested in each other, that you guys can recall?
I mean, there is some like tension built, I think, with like Tom Paris and B'Elanna Torres's relationship on Voyager. And then towards the end, Seven of Nine has a relationship with Chakotay, who is the first officer as well.
Spoilers.
Spoilers for show.
What?
So, and actually lately I've seen there's like a Twitter account that it's like inappropriate Voyager gifs. And so it's just a lot of Janeway and Chakotay talking about how much they want to bang each other. It's very funny. I'll try to repost something so people can find it. But anyway, I just say that I think that particular dynamic, that's also true. Yeah, I don't think that particular dynamic was ever really brought up in the way that I think it would be hopefully addressed in today's, modern writing room.
Yeah, I would imagine there would be a little bit more attention and delicacy paid to the potentially problematic effects of that relationship.
I think today it's an opportunity to say something, right? I think in the 90s, Star Trek was saying, hey, here's the utopian, right? And then in Utopia and the way we see the Federation of the future, all these things that are issues today, people have just gotten past, right? We don't even use money. There's no currency because we don't need it. And so I think the way we can look back on that is, yes, there's some tension between, Picard and Crusher, right? There's a little bit of tension there, but that tension was more due to the fact that this is the widow of his best friend than it does with the fact that, she serves under him on the ship, right? And we see this love triangle between Troy and Riker and Worf, right? There's so much where it's like, yeah, it has nothing to do with the regulations that we're not together. We're just not together.
The people in our comments are impressive. Pose a question about
answers.
Trek and relationships, and like everyone's just kind of rolling in with all sorts of stuff, and I don't even, because I don't know Trek, I don't even know if they're just making up names. But
we should this should be a fun quiz we do sometime with you, Grant.
Which is a real name of a character?
Yeah.
Which did we just make up?
Yeah. What did y'all think about the oh goodness, what's the
alien
name?
species?
Yeah, our aliens.
It seemed funny and absurdist, I guess, that they're presented as these
the Gelrakians.
Crystal worshipping,
like skater punks. Like they look like 90s punks with their little vests.
Right.
Like...
little hippie, little skater punk, but also a little bit primitive in that they're using spears. And I think they make a few references to that. Like, our ship's getting taken over by people wielding spears. But at the same time, obviously, either it was a perfect timing kind of issue, which I guess it was. That's kind of what they were hinting at with, like, the ship was in disarray and that's why they were caught off guard. But also, they seemed pretty effective, and most of what they wanted to do was just graffiti the place. Yeah. I love that they're just like Reapers, just like graffitiing the ship and making it more punk rock.
Well, I love this message of, we're going to be so focused on efficiency that we can't even save ourselves from an inept enemy, right? Like, once they decided to throw the rule book out of the window, it was a pretty easy victory, right? Like, we're not even necessarily talking about like phaser victory. Like,
they
they're just
beat
beating
them with iPads.
Yeah, banging them over the head with tablets. So, but all of that was for naught because they were so focused on time management.
Right. JC. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I love the line when the guy on the away mission gets hit with the spear and he's like, "I'm gonna die," and Mariner's just like, "We live on a spaceship. You're not gonna die from a spear wound."
Right. JC said Riker seduced an alien dude named Baron von Grant in an episode. Trust me, I watched all the episodes, and I just gotta ask you guys, is that legit, or is this just a joke on me? Am I a joke to you?
I'm just gonna keep drinking my beverage.
I noticed. Leaving me hanging here.
But yeah, I liked. I just thought there's lots of fun things on the planet, sort of timeline beyond even the will they, won't they now that we've set up for Mariner and Ransom. We have the away mission gone wrong because they brought down a piece of wood instead of a crystal. But I think it speaks to like sort of, I worked for a short time in like a lobbyist office. And I have to tell you, a lot of our laws are passed based upon who gives the best muffin baskets. And so that like, I thought the joke, the idea that they just brought the wrong gift and it ruined everything. I was like, yeah, that happens. You bring the wrong muffin basket. They don't like poppy seeds. Your bill is out the window. Like, and it's sad, but true. So I felt the realism in that moment.
Yeah. The crystal references, were they making some other like inside references to other crystals in Trek?
I mean, we get a lot of them. We have time crystals. We have dilithium crystals. Yeah. I did like that moment when they are like trying to come through the door, and the Bajoran security officer is trying to hold them back, and they're just like, "Give us your crystals," and they're like, "We don't have any, but the dilithium ones, but we can't give those to you." So I thought it was like a fun kind of like joke about the fact that crystals are used so much in Trek, but that idea that this one particular culture worships them, but they're sort of useless in their regard besides to graffiti things.
Crystals
and to be sharp.
Crystals were big in Star Wars too, like Kyber crystals or whatever for lightsabers.
Yeah.
I mean, the 60s, I guess, when these were made.
I mean, they're having a moment of resurgency. I don't know how many celebrities and friends I see telling me they're recharging their crystals under a full moon. So it's having a moment again.
All praise to the crystals.
The crystals.
Give me your crystals.
I liked when he was in the bar and he looked at the glassware and he was like, "The crystals," because it's just like any shiny object.
So I wanted to go ahead and open things up to the comments and let you listeners know, if you're watching us currently over on YouTube, please feel free to chime in with your thoughts and comments. and we're going to try and pop on some of those and address them now as well.
Wait, Grant, you
Yeah.
can't forget to talk about like one of the best moments of the entire show.
Miles O'Brien.
Miles O'Brien. Like
Of
that
course.
was I mean,
Who?
you have to tell me
Cole
that at that
Meany. I know who
moment
Cole Meany is.
when they were like, now let's talk about someone who was really the greatest. There was a split moment, a pause where you're like, who, and all these names are kind of running through your mind, and they're like Miles O'Brien, and he's standing behind a con panel. I was like, that's hilarious.
Is there something deeper to that, like that I don't know? Because I'm aware of Cole Meany and him being kind of like a racist asshole on the ship.
I mean, there are those moments, but I found an interesting sort of breakdown from inverse.com where they are talking about some of the references on this particular episode. But then we get the statue of O'Brien, who is our first legacy cameo, like actual physical like view of that. So we get to see him in the sort of cartoonified version, which is fun, besides just a name drop. And then they also, like, there's a couple of other references. Boimler is holding one of the greatest birds of the galaxy, which is actually apparently a reference to the nickname given to Gene Roddenberry, the great bird of the galaxy, which Sulu also references in A Blessing.
Terrible nickname.
But Sulu mentions it in The Man Trap, which is the first episode of Star Trek that ever aired. It also the scene also seems to reference the final scene, according to the article, in Battle for the Planet of the Apes, the original 1973, in which school children of the distant future are being told about how all the characters are sort of remembered. And then the other big thing in that particular scene is we see a tiny Borg child in a classroom with other Starfleet members. And so because it doesn't specify when in the future this is, we then have to assume there's a couple of options there. Like either the Borg has joined the Federation, or is this an XB child that's now being educated? There's like all these different sort of possibilities that come with that. So I thought that was an interesting thing to sort of point out, and perhaps we'll see on season 3 of Discovery, because we're also so far in the future. Perhaps we're now friends with the Borg. Who knows?
One Borg and 2 Ferengi.
Yes.
Chris Rogers says,
walk into a bar.
How do you feel about the balance between the jokes, references, and plot substance / potential for substance? I think that this show has a lot of heavy expectations they have to kind of shoulder at the start. This is a very known and very protected and revered property, and they have to walk a very tight line between how much humor they can get away with and how heavy and deep they can go with a show. I don't think they can go full on like multi-layered, super densely packed jokes like Rick and Morty. I don't think they can go really deep and dark and emotional with like BoJack Horseman right out the gate. But I think they're doing a really good job of striking that balance and making it feel like it exists. And I could be talking out of my ass. I'm going to go ahead and apologize because you guys know Trek a lot better than I, but it feels akin to what I've taken to mean the spirit of Trek. And I think they're doing a really good job at the start of this to introduce us to the world before they want to maybe potentially dive into something that's even heavier or jokes that are a little bit too off the wall, and I definitely won't get.
I would say I'm not expecting this show to get too heavy into plot. I think the Star Trek franchise. The Star Trek franchise has a ton of heavy plot-driven shows. I think for this show to be successful, first and foremost, it has to be funny. So, I mean, as a comedy, and Star Trek's really first comedy, it's got to be funny. I think the references are also it's fan service, right? So, and in a 25-minute format, I just don't know how much plot you're going to get. Like the plot that we're used to, the plot that we're expecting. And I'm okay with that, right? You're talking about a show that's fitting currently between kind of Picard and Discovery. And at some point, we're going to have, not a brave new world, a strange new world and Section 31. We're going to have all these shows. This is a nice, I like it for that in this. I don't know that I need an animated, heavy plot driven, not that funny show.
It's a respite.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think they're doing a smart job of like building some pieces of canon that we haven't seen before and using animation in order to do that in a smart way, specifically with all of the different alien worlds we're getting to see. I think that's like a smart use of building canon in an animated show. The original series also, I think, sought to do those things that weren't capable at the time in special effects, more in when I said the original animated series in this reference. And, much like the original animated series, that show was definitely a little bit more plot serious, but it was much lighter. There was jokes in it. And so I think this is a natural evolution. And because we have lower stakes, because it's lower decks, I think the opportunity for more jokes are available. And, I think they've been smart in how they've just written for funny, likable so far characters for us to enjoy. We don't have anyone so far with like a deep, dark past, although we might eventually get to that moment. But I think by that time, we've sort of gotten to know the show a little bit more. Like you were saying, Grant, you can't like go full deep depression on your first episode usually.
You never go full BoJack.
No full BoJack on the first ep. But I think you get there. I saw that with like I love Tuca and Birdie. That's like one of my favorite animated shows. Mm-hmm. And like it is very light and funny at the beginning, but then by the end of the season, they're talking about some very serious concepts and ideas, but you're like very vested in these characters at this point. And so you're along for the ride. So
that's
I'm hoping
the bait and switch.
Yeah, I'm hoping they'll sort of follow that same pathway. But yeah, so far I'm enjoying it. I also am just someone who's like at this point in like my day to day, if you can bring me out of what this world I'm living in and bring me somewhere else and I'm having a good time, I'm like down for the ride. So
good escapism.
Right.
Here's a mean question for us from EJ Zog. So which of the 3 new Star Trek would you choose to see continue on if you could only pick one? And I don't know why we would even have to. But,
we're getting more. Why do we need to pick just one?
they can't limit it to just one. They're going full crazy.
I think if we're talking Picard,
yeah, I think we're all dropping Picard.
Yeah, but if we're talking Picard, Lower Decks and Discovery, that's an easy choice for me. It's Discovery.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I would definitely keep Discovery.
Yeah, that's it's the cream of the crop right now, but ask that question again when Strange New World comes out, and it could be a tougher choice.
True. Let's see. Chris Rogers says, "Pod, it definitely feels like episodic plots are more broad strokes in the realm of Trek stereotypes, but over the course of the season, there's potential for deeper storylines that aren't so heavy." Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've definitely seen the pace has come down just a little bit from like the pilot episode, I think, giving us a little bit more time for these smaller moments, I think to allow things like the cold open to be a true cold open and to be very funny and give us like a little lighthearted, like welcome to the episode. We get to see more because we've been with these characters longer, we get to see if there's any reoccurring jokes. We get to start building on the jokes that have already been established. Something like Dr. Tiana, like her with the like, well, now you look like a goddamn cat scratching post, like at the end. I thought that was like it's an easy joke, but I liked that they threw it in there because we're all thinking it. So why not just put it out there?
We got a couple interesting comments about Ransom. PW Gregory says Ransom winning the fight by primarily using the patented Starfleet double-fisted punch got me. And Kern says Ransom gives speeches like Picard, but fights interlocked fist style like Kirk. Which I thought it's interesting the idea that Ransom might be this kind of hybrid character.
Yeah, I thought those were fun, smart references, and the idea that he wins the fight because the alien's actually like listening to what he's saying more than he's like tired of taking the punches.
This question is going to be for y'all. What Trek themes do you want to see poked fun at in Lower Decks? Because I'm not necessarily as I don't know, like what are some tedious? I feel like any of the hokey things I kind of vaguely have seen in earlier Trek, they already kind of just moved past that in like Discovery and even a little bit in Picard. So,
I want like the longest explanation of how they're going to fix a problem in Star Trek technical speak. I think that is just something that happens every episode across the board. Yeah, I think about like one time I was listening to a panel with people who wrote for like medical shows like Grey's Anatomy, and they're like, yeah, in the scripts, because we need to talk to our consultants, we just write things that say medical speak, medical speak, medical speak. And so I'm like, I know when they're like in the general writer's room for a first draft, there's just those points that just say like Star Trek solve problem, Trek magic, like whatever they want to put there until they can like sort of talk to the science consultants and like figure out the right way to do it as close to real science as possible. So I really hope they get to the point where someone's just like standing at a desk and it's just like, it's okay, sir, we're going to throw this gadget into the temporal loop, and we're going to cause a backdraft that's going to send us through a wormhole that inevitably will bring us out to the other side, and everything will be okay. Like,
yeah, I guess it would be kind of fun to see them play off of the evil Mirrorverse maybe a little bit in this, but where it isn't necessarily so absurdly, or maybe they take it even more absurdly over the top with how mustache twirly bad guy it is, to the point where it's so comical they can't even take this other side seriously.
Yeah. Also, we got to see some time travel. Time travel has to happen.
There are a couple of things I'm interested in, and we had a sneak peek at a couple of them, right? Misuse or inappropriate use of the holodeck. We got a glimpse of that early on, so I'm glad that they kind of poked fun at that. The fact that everybody is so healthy all the time, I kind of want them to explore that a little bit. I love the fact that on this episode, the captain was like, why are you guys walking so slow? Because in truth, when you see them pan to a ship, everybody is just kind of like chilling and strolling, like, hey, how you doing today? Like, what's he like? That is what we see in the background. But the one that I'm kind of curious about still is this sense that in almost every Trek, right, whether it's LaForge or Torres or Jet Reno or Scotty, there's always this last minute save by the engineer who's frantic and running around like a crazy person, and then they get it done. Like, I kind of want to see them explore that and poke fun at that a little bit.
Right. In that last episode, I still feel like, man, I missed out on talking about how fun episode 2 was, because it was really fun. I keep thinking about it even more so than episode 3, honestly. But when Rutherford switches jobs to be security, and he's like, nah, my passion is just to be in engineering. But I love that idea that he was able to just morph into security and fit alongside them so well as well. And I wonder how much they're going to explore what all his little eyepiece can do going forward.
Sorry.
Comment. Scotty made his reputation off buffer time. It's a good one.
That is hilarious.
Scotty did make his reputation off of buffer time and being that engineer who could so save the day with that last minute bubblegum duct tape attaching to a wire makes it all better situation.
You know what? Listeners, I want to thank you all for checking us out live over on our YouTube. We really appreciate it. And you guys have been awesome today with all the comments, all the feedback. It's been a lot of fun to engage this week's episode with y'all. And on that note, remember, you guys can always find us live on YouTube every Thursday talking about Trek. And of course, we're going to be covering Lower Decks every single week until it's done. And guess what happens as soon as that one's done? Discovery Season 3 starts up. And we're going to jump right over to that. And we're never going to stop talking about Trek because probably by the time we're done with that, Picard's going to be back, or Section 31. I don't even know.
You'll see. Season 2 and 3 of Lower Decks will be ready for us by then.
I mean, it's going to be a double-fisted punch in the gut. I'm excited.
Also, do not forget, you can still join us over on patreon.com/Star Trek Pod and check out our back catalog, including our Badass Women of Trek series. We also have our Best of 7 of 9. We have also been making our way through the Kelvinverse movies. I think we just have one more left to go. And at this point, I'm going to have to re-rent it and watch it again.
Right. I think I watched half of it and then we had to delay. And I was like, oh, I forgot what happened.
It's going to happen. But yeah, and if there are other pieces of Trek that you want us to talk about, specifically old Trek, you can let us know in our Slack channel for just $2 an episode. So please join us over there. They're doing watch parties all the time. The folks in our Slack channel are literally the best people. I love them so much. So join us over there.
They're pretty cool.
And you can follow us anytime you want on Twitter and Instagram at Star Trek Pod. Please tweet about the episode. You had a good time listening to us. Tell your friends. I want to shout out to people who help make our socials happen. Karen, who runs our Twitter, and James Worm, who helps run our Insta. Thanks, James. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you to them. And thank you so much again for joining us over on Star Trek Discovery Pod. Clyde, where can people follow you?
You can find me on Twitter at Clyde Haynes, and you can find me on the web at www.keyandclyde.com. That's KEI and Clyde.com.
Mariah, where can people find you online?
I'm at Mariah Gossett on all social platforms. That's Mariah with a Y and a Gossett with 2 S's and 2 T's.
You can find me at Baron Von Grant over on Twitter, over on Instagram. You can also follow our fearless captain. Hopefully he's won that mud wrestling competition against the Ferengi, and he's back online, so you can go follow him at Mike M. Garcia on Twitter. And be sure to come back and check us out on our live pod next Thursday at 9 p.m. Central. Until then, who wants to do it?
Live long and prosper.
Bye.